Hello everybody and welcome back to what is a bonus episode this week of GuigLit. A number of us are preparing for what is trial exams or mock examinations, and this video goes to my Form 11C who have requested a little go through on the EDUQAS Unseen Poetry examination component. So we're going to delve into that. I'm going to give you some insights and tips based on the years of experience that I've had teaching this, as well as some guidance that is often provided by the examination board themselves. So, what do we want to look at and what do we want to do with this video today? Well, first of all, I would strongly encourage you to take notes on what advice I'm going to give you in terms of how you would answer such a particular question, okay? And on top of that, try attempting practice papers in time conditions. Your teacher may provide them. If you have a search on the internet, you can find a number of them as well, where you can use the same tips and advice I'm providing today with that very same practice paper. As well as that, again, use this as a revision tool. I've mentioned this in our exam success series on Macbeth. Try and use this by yourself or with classmates. Make a wide variety of different uses on this particular topic. So, a couple of things I just want to tell you that EDUQAS provide in terms of the demands on this paper. What does it look like and what are you up against? Well, it's a 1 hour time limit in total. That has to factor in the reading time you will have as well to read both poems. There are 2 questions worth 40 marks in total, so it's a big share of your overall GCSE in English literature. Question 1 is an analysis task. You are provided with a poem that, by the whole hint of the title, is unseen. We don't know what it is. You will be the first people to know. And it's worth 15 marks of the total of 40. And then question 2 is slightly longer, slightly weightier as well. It's a comparison of the first poem from question 1 along with a new poem, and it's worth 25 marks. So, factoring that in, you probably want to spend a little more time on that question than you do on the first one because it's worth that many more marks. On top of this, both poems will have the same theme, and as I show you today, folks, you're going to see how that's made very explicit in the actual breakdown of the examination question. Such themes could be childhood or nature or growing old, but what you have to remember as you watch this is that both poems share the same theme. Don't overcomplicate it for yourselves and ignore what is a very important piece of information. So, a few top tips from my shared experience of having taught this over many years now and the experiences of my former pupils themselves. Now, make sure you read the poem. I'd recommend 3 times personally with each poem. Myself as someone with years of experience on this could never fully comprehend and get a complete mastery of a poem on the first attempt. So it's important to make sure you've given yourself a good few times to really go over the poem and really extract as much of the information as you can. On top of this, try and track the poem from top to bottom. What does our title tell us? Later on, what do these first lines tell us? Then moving on from there, what do our sort of middle lines tell us, and how does the poem conclude? Does the poem give us a different idea at the end than it did at the start? In addition, timing is crucial. Really pay close attention to this, and it varies depending upon student to student, but my recommendation would be approximately 20 minutes on the first question with enough time to spend 20 to 25 minutes, and then you're looking at somewhere between 35 to 40 minutes on the second question, because it's worth more marks. But really pay close attention to those timings. Give yourself enough time to get onto the second question. And lastly, have a bank of connective words, particularly for question 2, unlike, whereas, although, however, as well as, certain words that will be able to give you an easy way into comparing both poems for that second 25 mark question. So, going forward, here is what the examination paper would look like. And it's important to remember that I'm just showing you this because Unseen Poetry always comes at the very foot of this, the very bottom. It's the last thing you do. It will obviously change slightly for those of you taking this exam in 2021. However, it is the last piece you do, and often students are quite tired at this point. Students have gone through the gamut of the other texts, So give yourself enough time mentally as well to really get the most marks out of what can be quite a tricky component for English literature. So here is an example of a question. This question is taken from the 2017 paper and it's freely available on the EDUQAS website. And let's read through it. So you have to answer both question 1 and question 2. You're advised to spend about 20 minutes on question 1 and about 40 minutes on question 2. So it provides you with the idea there of time management. I can't stress how important that is. Read the 2 poems, Midwinter by Graham Davies and Today by Billy Collins. In both of these poems, the poets write about a day in different seasons of the year. So we have our comparison. We have seasons of the year, about a day in different seasons of the year. So we have our theme. Okay, that'll be at the very top of the question itself. And you want to remember that, folks. That's really, really important. So here's the first question. Write about the poem Midwinter by Graham Davies and its effect on you. What's really important here is it's asking you. So it's asking you and inviting you to write in a first-person perspective, which is extremely rare within the context of the examinations on this exam board. You may wish to consider such things as what the poem is about and how it is organised, the ideas the poet may have wanted us to think about, the poet's choice of words, phrases and images and the effects they create, and how you respond to the poem. So what is your thoughts? What are your opinions as the poem progresses and changes? Okay, so they give you a really wide range of ideas they'd like you to look at there. So I'm going to show you a particular way and how I would plan for such a question as this. Okay, now I've taught this in a number of different ways to students, both present and past, and I recommend them to cover up the majority of the poem. Just start with the title, okay, and the notes you're going to see here is from me just sort of free flowing with it, giving you some ideas on how to annotate, or how I would annotate were it me attempting this question. So I block out the rest of the poem. I just start with the title, Midwinter. Now to me, this gives me these ideas of the darkest, coldest part of the year, and I've put there just in brief words, misery possibly. This idea of darkness as a mood and an atmosphere could be seen as the poem continues. However, I've deliberately blocked out the rest of the poem because to help me track, I want to just see it as it goes chronologically, top to bottom, and see how my understanding develops and shapes as it progresses. So I give myself just a little bit more of the poem now, just the first line there as you see it. No breezes move the branches, no birds sing. Now instinctively as I was reading this, I saw, okay, we've got no breezes, no birds, okay? So I've got this idea of the repetition of no, okay? Possibly giving me this idea of it being negative, no life, okay? This idea of a more miserable mood, probably coming through here, possibly. But this is how I would annotate it, as I say, in the context of a real examination. And then I provide myself with a little more of the poem, just a couple more lines. You don't need an annotation on every line. I really want to stress that. But just give yourself an opportunity to read them through. And to me personally, I picked out this phrase, turned the world to grey. Notice this idea of the colour grey is negative, isn't it? Then turned the world, this idea of it being cast on everything. The whole world is cast in this miserable shade. So continuing forward, I gave myself the next few stanzas now. I was feeling quite confident with the poem, so I was able to just branch out a little further now. Because you couldn't go line for line for line for the entire poem, because that would be too time costly. So I now look at the next 2 stanzas, okay, the paragraphs of poetry, as it were. And I look at for me, the phrase is the dead leaves cling. That stood out to me, this idea of dead leaves, this sense of no life continuing. Cling is quite a desperate word, a desperate verb, okay? And on top of that, the bitter cold that makes your fingers sting. Notice this idea of sting suggesting a pain for the first time, like a physical pain. That sensation is starting to come through in the poem, and maybe I could talk about that or comment on that in my own response. A little word of warning and caution at this point, folks. I know I'm providing far more than I would need to write on. Okay, and a 15-mark response, 3 to 4 really well-constructed points are more than enough for the time you're provided with. But what I want to do, particularly as a as someone trying to attempt this question is to provide myself with enough of an array of different points that I can build a response on. Okay, so I won't use all of these. I wouldn't use all of these in my response, but I would try and find as many as I can. So then we continue and I provide the rest of the poem. Now, other things that stood out to me in this poem, the particular points, I was looking at no difference between dawn and dusk and day, the semblance that the world, existence, has stopped and reality is no longer what it was. Moving forward into the poem, this idea, however, of a more positive aspect, that everything is balanced between increase and decay, maybe a sign of hope, this idea of increase and balance, that maybe not everything is lost. And then I found in the last line, trusting for the spring, we see this phrase, the earth in winter, trusting for the spring, is repeated on a regular basis, and it finishes on a slight semblance of a message of hope. Now, as you've watched this video, you may find that there are other points or quotes that you took out, and that's entirely fine. What I'm showing you here is you've got more than enough points in your arsenal to actually answer on create a response to this question, but I've deliberately taken some from the top, some from the middle, and some from the bottom. Ensure you have that wide tracking. They don't have to be the points I had, but to make sure you have those from across the poem. That real sense of tracking is very important. So we have the quote, we have the question back up here, along with the points I've just highlighted from the previous slide. How would I write about this now? I've given you just a few paragraphs. It's not a complete response here, and I want to talk you through the way that is a very effective way of answering on such a question. So, the title Midwinter makes me think of the bleakest, darkest part of the year. Notice how I've started with the title. I've written in the first person, makes me think of. It makes me initially believe. Notice that word initially. So I'm allowing myself the opportunity to go, well, the poem may change in its tone, as I learned that it did. Graham Davies' poem will be one that conveys a pessimistic portrayal of this season of the year. So I'm going back to the focus of both poems. I've started with the title, and I've written a first person perspective as per the recommendations from the question. I then provide a few more paragraphs, and notice on each one as the poem continues towards the end of the poem, I start each of my paragraphs with a tracking phrase to make a clear understanding of where I am in the poem as I go. What's interesting as well, sometimes I've done what I call digging into a quote. So if we refer to the middle paragraph, I notice how Davies refers to how, quote, the dead leaves cling, end quote. Words such as dead and cling, I've picked those words out and made more of them. Okay, do remember your quote marks to get the marks. Okay, has to have the quote marks over them. And then I've allowed myself in the end paragraph there, towards the end of the poem, I sense that the mood slightly changes to one of slight optimism. You may find the mood changes, or you may find the mood and the atmosphere continues, or the message continues to be the same throughout the poem. But allow yourself the opportunity to maybe change your mind as it goes. So here are just some examples of a few paragraphs. It wouldn't be a complete response, but it's certainly something that would be able to, if you were to follow such a formula, would be very, very effective for your 15-mark question. So now you see the second question. Now compare Today by Billy Collins and Midwinter by Graham Davies. Again, what you want to compare, what poems the poems are about and how they're organised, the ideas behind the poems and what the poets may have wanted us to think about, poets' choices of words, phrases, images, very similar categories and criteria they provided on the first question, and again how you respond. So it's inviting a first person response. Now we have the poem there, and I'm not going to go in as much detail in the second poem as I did the first, because I really want to stress that the important thing on the 25 marks is the comparative aspect. It's to compare both poems. You can't just do the same thing on question 1 as you did question 2. It wouldn't be effective, and it wouldn't be addressing the question right. So what we see here is a few paragraphs that show you the aspects of comparison. I start again with the title. I said the title Today makes me think of the present and hints at a more positive mood when compared to the title Midwinter, which has more bleak pessimistic connotations. So I'm going, start with my new one and then compare back each time. I start with my new one, as I see in the next paragraph there, and then I compare back to midwinter. So analyze, then back to midwinter each time. And then I want to continue tracking. So Billy Collins' poem begins. Later on in today, I sense that. This is unlike / also seen in the first poem. And then towards the end of the poem, this is similar or different to midwinter because. So that tracking is still there, but I always start with the second poem and then compare back to the first poem. Really important you get that measure of that and provide those short, sharp quotes. I tell my students a quote should be no more than 6 to 8 words, and I'd strongly encourage you to follow that same pattern and method. So, as always, thank you so much for watching today's video. Please feel free to give this a thumbs up and a like, share this with any of your friends who also may be doing unseen poetry, either at this time in the trial exams or if you're watching this at a later date in the real examinations. Also click on that subscribe button to get more content of books, beards and beyond. We have a Twitter account at LitGuig and an Instagram account at GuigLit. So to everyone, my form included, and to any student and anybody that is watching this in any form, I just want to wish you all the very best. Take care, and until the next video, bye bye.